Hey, I'm Stuart of LeaseSpec. This behind me, or beside me, either rather, is R34 full track build that if you follow my social media, you've probably seen me working on over the last couple of months. We've gone through, stripped the interior, stripped the undercoating, kind of gotten the car down to a bare chassis so that we can begin the fun stuff, which is, in my opinion, fabrication. Today I will actually be showing you some of the Airjack install, and what I'm gonna be showing you is some of my thought process, what I have to consider whenever I'm considering their location, what they have to contend around, not only underneath the car, but also inside the car. Where's their best fit? Is it gonna interfere with the exterior panels and the other stuff that I have going on with the car, etc. So where I started originally was I mocked this one up, and this one is just sitting inside of bare sheet metal. And when I set this one, I realized that I actually wanted to go with a sleeve installation rather than sandwiching the factory sheet metal with plates. So I had to scrap that idea. I lost a few days, but I went ahead and ordered these sleeves from Nuke Performance. Nuke Performance is actually the company who my customer has chosen to go with on this project. They have a very interesting characteristic, which is they operate at 8 bar, which means that I can raise and lower this car with a standard shop air compressor, which is gonna be very advantageous whenever we're at the track. I don't have to worry about having a bottle of specific gas. It's even gonna be probably helpful in here too, just being able to raise and lower the car with my standard air compressor. It's very complication free, and so far I'm a very big fan of the product. But to kind of show you where we're at currently, this is the second jack that I have set. So I started by laser leveling a line down the car so that these were installed true on X and Y axis to each other. And once everything was located, I went ahead and drilled the bottom hole. Once I drilled the bottom hole, I then projected all of my further cuts using a level and a laser, making sure that this stayed as accurate and as true as possible. It will use just a little bit of wiggling around by the time I'm ready to set it in, but as you can see, it's pretty tight right now as is. So to within about half a degree, I have set the car's level and I have set the level of the Airjack, and it was probably sitting around, like I said, half a degree right now. I can adjust it, I can modify it later. I'm not gonna tack it in off or crooked. I want these things as true as possible whenever they're done. Second thing I had to consider is now that I'm seeing the design and I'm seeing how I'm gonna weld it in, I don't like these open pockets right here. So I have to actually consider a couple of things. For the depth, you realistically don't want these pads going any lower than the frame rail. So typically, projecting a straight line across the frame rails is a good starting point to picking the depths or the heights. On this car, I'm actually gonna go a little bit lower than the frame rail. We wanna make sure that defrosters is something that can stay on the car and operate fully functional later on. So that's what I'm making sure remains and I don't have to alter. I'm gonna give myself a little bit more room, and I'm gonna go probably about half an inch past. What that's gonna do is that's gonna give me a little bit of room on top of the Airjack, because I still need to put the fittings on top for the airlines. And it's also gonna help me with this issue right here. So as I had said before, you can kind of see there's holes in the sleeves that are cut about, I don't know, I'd say that's a good 3/4, almost an inch up. What I want to do is I actually want those buried, and I'm kind of at a disadvantage because you can see I have to contend with the curves of the chassis and the OEM sheet metal. But if I can, I would like to get it to where I can bury all of those holes and get a nice clean weld joint all the way around. I'll probably reinforce it with some plate, but the less holes and the less exposure that I leave on this car, the less likely we are to get water in case of an off or anything else like that in the future. Also, I'm sure you can't help but notice that the original floor is cut from the roll cage work. All of this will get cleaned up, rust neutralized. I'll end up stitch welding this as well as a few parts of the frame rails, and then I'll end up covering it up. That's gonna look nice by the time it's done, but for now, no sense in starting on that until I'm done with the Airjacks, in my opinion. So anyways, that's where we're at on the underside. That's kind of some of the things that I've had to consider and contend with. So now let me show you what we're working with on the inside of the car. All right, so inside the car, this is our next set of challenges. Well, they start out as challenges. Actually, it's been made pretty easy by the time it's said and done. This is an example of the one with the sleeve installation, which is what I was aiming for from the get-go. I'm sure you remember on the bottom, we had just the slight protrusion of solid steel. This is kind of what I'm left with here. So I'm gonna be able to get a nice grab on this, this pedal box square tubing, But most importantly, I'm gonna give this tube all of its reinforcement by tying into the cage as much as possible and reinforcing the chassis wherever it welds to the chassis. Ideally, on all 4 corners, I would like for my Airjacks to contact the roll cage as much as possible because I think that's gonna give it its most sound footing. And obviously factory sheet metal is only so strong, especially if you're just welding it directly to the tube. So there's better ways to do it, and I think there's a lot of reinforcement and structure that needs to be built and will be built and added there. As far as the height goes, this is about what I'm happiest with. And then I got to test fit it with the pedal set and make sure that I wasn't gonna have any sort of interference from the driver foot or anything else along those lines. Typically from the factory, this is gonna be where the fuse panel is, and there's gonna be some relays and various wiring junctions there. On this particular car, we don't have to worry about it. This will get a full custom wiring harness. There will be no semblance of fuses or anything else there. That's just gonna be reserved for Airjacks. And then we'll figure out the masters for the pedal set and everything else along those lines before we set the dash bar in. This one doesn't have the sleeve for install. This is only in there for size and height reference. But the reason I set it and the reason why I set this blower motor, and temporarily the evaporator, even though that's not going back in, the reason the blower motor is in is because I wanted to make sure that we could keep defrost in here, and I wanted to make sure that the Airjack wasn't gonna hit it or interfere with it. So that's probably not gonna be the final resting place for the Airjack. It's probably gonna be down a little bit. It'll also have the sleeve, just like this one down here. And then of course, just as I had mentioned down here, I'll be tying into this cage as much as possible. That way it has as much vertical rigidity as possible. Okay, so now that I've got the front Airjack set, you can kind of see I have the sleeves both in place. They're protruding a little bit further than they're probably going to. I need to kind of fine tune that. Nothing's tacked in yet. I just wanted them fit in the car so that I could final adjust it once I'm ready to weld. And before I weld, I'll be doing weld through primer on the inside. I might do some support structure between the pieces of factory sheet to kind of give back some of the strength that I've taken away. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, I'll be tying into the roll cage before I finalize everything. So I'll make sure that direction is good, as far as make sure they're not off kilter or anything like that. Final set them, stitch weld these areas, plate this up. This will be beautiful by the time it's done. And that pretty much wraps everything up. As you can see on this side, to mimic the other, I have 360-degree welded it to the sheet metal. Again, this is probably not gonna be how it stays entirely because I still need to cover up the bottom of the roll cage plate like I had discussed before and just kind of strengthen some things up and then strengthen it inside of the car. But this is a good base. The sleeves are all set. Everything's good to go there now. You can kind of see If in the background, you could kind of see I began stitch welding inside of the engine bay. I have just temporarily put on some primer and let the primer run between the panels so that I don't see any sort of rust or anything while I'm working on the car. And my next project is going to be doing the same thing over on this side and then attacking the firewall. And then eventually we'll make our way back to the rear air jacks. So hope that answers anybody's questions about this process or gives you at least an idea of how you can attack it, how you can approach it. You might see different variables on your car or your project. I tried to share my thought process and what I was seeing as I went through the steps on this car, and hopefully it helps you. Or maybe you see that I missed something or anything along those lines, you know, feel free to comment, let me know. And I'm always receptive to criticism, and I'm always open to a conversation about any sort of modification. So hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching, and hopefully see you guys next time.